Hello, health champions. Today we're going to talk about 10 food ingredients that are too toxic to be sold in China, but they are legal and used every day in the United States. Number one is ractopamine, and this is a chemical or a drug that they feed to animals to make them grow faster. Now, the problem is that it's been linked to cause heart issues, anxiety, and muscle tremors in humans. And as a result, China, the European Union, and a total of 160 different countries have placed a complete ban on this, not only just to use it, but they've also banned an import of meat that has this stuff used in the production. But in the United States, the FDA says it is generally regarded as safe, and they can use it both to produce animals and to sell the food for people to eat. So why am I talking about China? Why am I comparing to them? Well, because they're known not to be the cleanest. They have tremendous environmental problems and pollution and public health issues there. And what they're going through with their pollution and health issues, a lot of countries have already gone through. So Europe and Germany and the US, they are decades ahead, not that they're ahead in sophistication because China is the leading manufacturer now, but they have had some experience. They've gone through the process of understanding that if you don't take care of the environment at the same time, now you're going to come back and pay for it later. So they've learned some important environmental lessons. And yet, when it comes to food, when it comes to the pollution that we put inside bodies, then the US is still lagging far behind China. Even though the US has had decades and decades to clean up, and China just started looking at food regulation around 2010 and banning a lot of these substances, the US is just super slow to catch on. It seems like it's a very, very low priority. And maybe that's why the US has the highest healthcare costs of any country in the world. And it's not even by a little, it's like double per capita of the country following closest behind. And of course, since they're just treating symptoms, it's not really healthcare at all. It's really more like sick care. So it's like whatever makes a buck, they can continue to do. They're allowed to do what they want as long as they can make money, and then we'll pay for it later with this sick care. And then, of course, the sick care generates a lot of money in its own right. The second banned food is chlorine-washed chicken. And why would they wash it in chlorine? Because there are such unsanitary conditions, both in raising chickens and in the slaughterhouses, that they're a growing ground for bacteria. And now they have to try to kill off those bacteria, and chlorine is a very potent toxin. But the problem is that chlorine reacts very, very strongly with all kinds of things. And in chicken, it reacts with the organic materials. And in the chicken, of course, that's primarily protein and fat. And in doing that, it creates a number of very bad compounds. I'll mention a couple here. So trihalomethanes and chlorinated hydrocarbons. And there are many others who are almost as bad, but between them, they have been linked to bladder cancer, to liver damage, to reproductive issues. They are known to be neurotoxic, and they cause endocrine disruption, meaning that the molecules mimic hormones and they change how your endocrine or your hormone system works. Plus, they damage your immunity and they create DNA damage. So therefore, China and the European Union does not allow any chicken to be sold that has been washed in chlorine. But here's the interesting part, that in Europe, they did a big study and they found that washing with chlorine wasn't really as effective as they first thought. It wasn't really good at eliminating these bacteria, and on top of that, it was highly toxic. So what did they do? How did they produce their chicken? Well, they decided to look at root causes, and they said, where are these bacteria coming from? Why are they flourishing so much? So they gave up on some of those unsanitary conditions, and they worked to improve the standards on hygiene, on how to raise, how to farm, and how to process these chickens. And you have to wonder, why wouldn't they do that in the United States as well? Why are they so quick to just douse chemicals on everything? Number 3 is brominated vegetable oil, and that's an emulsifier, something that makes things mix that they use in citrus drinks. So you could find them in Gatorade and Powerade and Fanta and in Mountain Dew. But only last year, in August of 2024, the FDA had a mandate where they said, we're banning this stuff, you gotta take it out, you have 1 year to do it. So August of 2025 is where all of it has to be gone. So there's still some drinks legally made in the US that have this. But here's the interesting part, that by 2024, all of these drinks and the companies behind them had already removed this brominated vegetable oil, some as early as 2013, 2014, even though that was kind of late compared to the UK that did it in 1970 and the rest of Europe did it in 2008. But here's the question, why did these companies go ahead and do this? They don't like to change things, and there was no mandate until 2024. So why did they do it 10 years earlier? And the answer is consumer demand. When consumers educate themselves and say, I want to pay for this, I don't want to pay for that. If there are 2 products side by side and one has it and one doesn't, then people are going to vote with their wallets. And they're going to choose the ones that they think is better or safer. And then they're going to stop making the ones that people don't want to buy. So one of the strongest things that you can do, you have a lot of power, is to stop buying things that you don't want them to keep making. I just wonder, why are they so much more informed in China and in Europe? Why are American consumers so laid back, and it's like such a low priority about their health and what they're putting into their bodies? Number 4 is artificial color. And there are different groups, but one of the worst is called titanium dioxide, known as E171. And this is a whitening agent that they put in food, sometimes just to bleach it, but other times they use it even if they're going to color something afterwards with red or blue or green. They use this first so that they get a more consistent color, something that is more consistent with their brand. The problem, of course, is that it's been linked to DNA damage and cancer, which is why it's banned in most of the world. Some other colors that are very questionable are yellow number 5, red number 40, and blue number 1. And these have been linked to ADHD, especially in kids, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but also with allergies and with cancer and gut inflammation, gut disruption. So China and the European Union has banned the top one, titanium dioxide, and most countries have extremely tight restrictions on the other colors, and there are some countries that have banned artificial colors altogether. However, in the United States, you can still find thousands and thousands. Most processed foods would have artificial colors in them. So things like M&M's, Skittles, Starburst, Mentos, Duncan Hines frosting, Nabisco chips, Ahoy cookies, Little Debbie's and Twinkies. And these are just a few examples of processed foods, but they put them in other things as well that sometimes you really don't understand why they would. And things like mayonnaise and dressings would have whitening agents in them. And one thing that frustrated me to no end was you could never buy pickles without yellow number 5. It's like, who needs color on a pickle? And of course, they also use it in things like processed cheese and skim milk powder, plus thousands and thousands of more products. And it's really funny. I still remember when I came to this country, to the US, decades ago, and I try to tell people that cheese is not really orange by default. They've added that color. And today, fortunately, they're using more of the beta carotene than the artificial stuff. But even so, why do you think you have to color cheese? Just because they start doing it and then people expect it, and it's almost like sacrilege to try to change it. Number 5 is RBGH, or recombinant bovine growth hormone. And this is for cows, and it makes them produce more milk. And the FDA allows this practice, but China, European Union, and most other countries have banned this use. And the reason is that it's linked to cancer and hormone disruption or endocrine disruption. But here's the interesting thing. Even though FDA allows it and farmers can make more money by having the cows produce more milk, less than 10% of US farms use it, and it is going down every year. And again, the reason is that if people don't want it, then manufacturers will remove it voluntarily, even without legislation. Or in some cases, of course, you have to suspect that they might use it and not tell you, especially if it's like this one, where it is very, very difficult to detect. Number 6 is BHA and BHT, which are 2 preservatives that have both been linked to cancer. They are widely used in processed foods like snack foods and baked goods and cereals, and you wonder why that muffin is still good 2 months later, or not good, but moist and soft. But it's also used to prevent things going rancid, so it's used in vegetable oils and butter. So this would be a great reason to know where your butter's coming from. If it's a reputable farm, at least make it organic, even though that's probably no guarantee. Or you can buy it from overseas where they're not allowed to use these. Furthermore, it's used in processed meats, in potato chips, it's used in canned soup, frozen pizza, and in chewing gum. Number 7 is trans fats, which is a really nasty substance. It causes heart disease and inflammation, and it messes with the cell membranes in the body. And in the US, it's one of the handful of things that they have to put on the food label, on the nutrition label. But here's the thing, if it has less than half a gram of trans fat per serving, now they're allowed to round it down to 0, and they're allowed to put this curious phrasing on the package. They say, trans fat free per serving, whatever that means. And trans fats have been banned in China and in the European Union. And in fact, they were actually banned by the FDA already in 2015. And they gave the industry 3 years till 2018 to get it out of all the products completely. So then you would wonder, why is it still used broadly? Why would you have to see it on a label if it was completely banned? If it wasn't supposed to exist, then why is it still on a label? And why is it still very, very popular in restaurants and fast food? And why can you still find it in things like baked goods and fried foods and, for example, microwave popcorn? So it's all very confusing. I don't understand it. But what I do is I read the labels of food. If there's ever a package of food that has a label, then you read the fine print, and if it says partially hydrogenated oils, then you know for a fact that it has trans fats in it. It may be less than the half a gram, but it absolutely has it in there. Number 8 is TBHQ, which is another preservative, and this one is petroleum-based. It's been linked to liver damage, to tumors, and to DNA damage. It has been completely banned in Japan, and it is very tightly restricted in China and the European Union. However, in the United States, they are allowed to use it without such tight restrictions or warnings. And some of the items where it's used the most are things like ramen noodles, frozen meals, and snack foods. Kind of makes you wonder about snack foods since they've shown up on multiple lists in this video. Number 9 is potassium bromate. So bromide shows up here a second time, but here they use it as a dough conditioner, and it has been linked to cancer. It is used because it helps as a dough conditioner. It makes fluffier bread and stronger bread. And it has been banned in China, in the European Union, and about 30 other countries. But in the US, we can still find it in white bread, in pizza dough, in tortillas. Have you ever thought about why the tortillas are so elastic, how you can use them as a wrapper for burritos and things? And I mean, you can break them, but they're pretty darn tough. You often find it in biscuit dough. That's those little rolls with biscuit dough in the refrigerated section. And you can even find it in baking flour. Number 10 is LFTB, pink slime, also known as lean, finely textured beef. And just what exactly is that? We're going to walk through that and see why it's such a controversy. So whenever they slaughter an animal, they cut it up in different pieces and they make all the nice cuts that you recognize that they can sell, like a sirloin or a ribeye or a fillet or ribs or something. But all the pieces that aren't neat enough to be sold individually, they're called trimmings. And they're basically wasted unless you can recycle them. So what they do here is they heat them up to about body temperature. So they're not cooking it, they're just making the fat soft. So 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 38 degrees Celsius. And then they spin it really fast, they centrifuge it, and now the fat separates from the lean meat. So in the beginning, these trimmings had about 50% or a little more than 50% fat and 50% lean meat. But after this process, it ends up being about 95% lean and 5% fat. And then they grind this up very finely. So now it's 5% fat, so it's called lean. And then they grind it finely and they mix it in with other ground beef. So it's kind of like a filler, but they can often get away with it because it is still technically 100% beef. There's nothing in there that didn't come from the animal. It has the same nutritional value, etc. So I could totally respect that. Reducing waste is not a bad idea. So where's the controversy? Why is this banned? Because in the processing, you make a lot of bacteria and you have to kill those off. You have to sanitize that. And they use something called ammonium hydroxide, which is an antimicrobial chemical. And because of that, it is banned in the European Union. And the reason is primarily quality concerns. They're thinking that if you can sort of clean up meat through this process and mix it in, how do you really know what you're getting? And because people really like to know what they're getting, there's been a huge resistance in the United States. There was a huge uproar when this was exposed, that there were hamburger restaurants that were mixing in this so-called pink slime in their burgers and no one knew. And they figured they could get away with it because technically it was still 100% from the cow. And you don't have to declare if there's something that's used in the processing, but it's not an ingredient, then you don't have to tell people that on the label. So take the time to educate yourself about health and about food and what they put into your food. And then you use your hard-earned money to pay for the stuff that you want to keep, and don't spend money on the things you don't want them to make anymore. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to love that one. And if you truly want to master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, and turn on all the notifications so you never miss a life-saving video.